Early voting in Chicago is now open in all 50 wards through Election Day on November 5th. Remember, any voter can vote at any early voting site no matter where they live in the city. And if you haven't registered yet or you recently moved, same-day registration is available at all early voting sites. Just bring 2 forms of ID, one of which should have your current address. Go on and check voting off your to-do list and vote early. Go to chicagoelections.gov for more information. Today on CityCast Chicago, for over 50 years, Devon Avenue on the far north side in the West Ridge neighborhood has been a cultural hub for South Asian Chicagoans. From Damon to California, it remains packed with small businesses, delicious bakeries, and legendary grocery stores. However, the community is more spread across the Chicagoland area these days. But this week, as some celebrate Diwali, the Hindu festival of lights, traffic picks up in the neighborhood. So we're checking in on some of the best South Asian restaurants on and off Devon Avenue. It's Wednesday, October 30th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I am joined by Eater Chicago editor Ashok Selvam. Ashok, welcome back to CityCast Chicago.
Great to be here.
Hey, as always, we're happy to have you in the building. Folks listening might know that we can find Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, and Nepalese restaurants throughout Chicago and the burbs, but Devon Street is well known for its South Asian dining. Can you tell us how and when did it become the cultural hub that it is now?
Well, it's changed a lot, man. You know, growing up, you know, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. It was really bustling back then. You know, it was crowded. The whole history of the street is really interesting. You know, in the 60s and 70s, it was really a Jewish hub. And it extended down. You look at the streets, the honorary names, you'll see like, you know, parts of the street are devoted to Golda Meir, parts of the street are devoted to Gandhi, parts of the street are devoted to Nehru. It just kind of depicts kind of the evolution of Chicago. But, you know, the Indian, South Asian population probably settled in, you know, the 60s, 70s. You know, the Jewish population kind of pushed toward the lake and eventually to suburbs like Skokie, and which is something that you're seeing right now with a lot of the Indian population. It's actually more like when I grew up, it was more Indian and Hindu, and which also reflects the cuisine because you didn't see a lot of beef on the street. You know, now with more Pakistani, which is, you know, a more of a Muslim country than India. A lot of people don't take into the to thought that India has actually more Muslims in the country than Pakistan. And so you can't say it's one or the other, but reflecting the change, you see a lot of these menus kind of push offering a lot of beef, which is a really controversial subject. You know, you can find beef and not just like in particular parts, but, you know, in parts of Hinduism, so the beef is holy. So, you know, you don't see a lot of consumption of that in general. And the first wave of immigrants to America kind of brought that, you know, those beliefs with them. In that, you got kind of a silo, you know, you kind of got like a photograph, a snapshot of what, you know, the old world used to be. Because, you know, you talk about contemporary Indian cuisine, contemporary South Asian cuisine, it's not really what's happening in America. You know, you leave the homeland and stuff still happens. It means, you know, nothing gets encased in amber. So it doesn't reflect the latest things that's happening over there. You get, you know, what you grew up with.
Even though the neighborhood changed, what do you remember about Devon Avenue growing up, like visiting with friends and family?
Oh, man, it was, as a youngster, it was like, oh my goodness, my mom is just going to disappear and go shopping for an hour. When will we get home? When we get home, I want to go play my Nintendo. I want to go play with Sega. You know, you're a kid and you're wanting to kind of relate and, you know, be part of the, you know, fit in. And you don't, and this is a cliched thing, but you didn't really realize, wow, we can get this at Patel Brothers. You know, I didn't know Patel Brothers, the store was founded in 1974 in Chicago. It's the world's largest Indian grocer. And I think as Chicagoans, we don't take pride in that. That is just an awesome fact. It's everywhere. You go to New York, New Jersey, you go to California, it's the name upon name. So being as a kid, you know, like, okay, we're going to be here for 3 hours. I'm going to have to, relax and not get antsy about it. We're going to go get some mangoes, because that's a thing, the mango coalition that extends a culture. I'm going to have to carry these huge sacks of basmati rice that you can't get at the Jewel or Dominic's, but my mom's going to need help with that. So I'm going to do that. And, we're going to get these sweets like gulab jamun and jalebi. Gulab jamun's like kind of a spongy cake and syrup. Jalebi is kind of that bright green, deep fried sweet full of syrup. And it just makes your face pucker. But, you're a kid, so you're kind of oblivious to that fact. So, there's a lot of food memories. I remember my uncle from, our family's from Bangalore, India. He came in and he really kind of introduced me to, kebabs. He's like kind of like rolled. They weren't skewered necessarily, or the kebabs I think we get from Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cuisine. These were like, ground meat, ground lamb, and this put around a skewer and kind of charred, grilled. They came in this really bright red color. They were spiced. And I remember the first bite of them. It was like fantastic. I've never eaten something like that.
Are there any places, I know you mentioned Patel Brothers, the grocer is still there on Devon Avenue. Are there any places that have endured since you were a kid that you still like to visit?
I was there a couple of weeks ago, and it looks like a totally new place. When you're there as a kid, you're kind of guided by your parents, and there again, a cultural baggage. So my mom didn't want me to get hooked on Pakistani food because she was like, you're gonna like it better than my food. I'm gonna keep you away from there. So now, without that kind of guardrail, I can go and Pakistani samosas. It's the kind of that deep fried dumpling. It's very different from an Indian samosa. An Indian samosa has potatoes. It's thicker. It's more like a pastry. While the Pakistani style, it's sometimes filled with meat. I know my mom would be not cool with that, and she's not a vegetarian. But it's like really, really crispy. It's served with a different kind of chutney or sauce. And, I love this stuff. And again, my mom would never make it, and she would never bring that to like holidays, like Diwali was coming up. But it is, I'll say this maybe a little quiet. I like it better.
I mean, when you're scouring the city and you're looking for restaurants to add to your list, either in Chicago or out, what are the qualities you look for? I mean, even just the way you describe the difference between a Pakistani and an Indian samosa, it's clear you got some expert taste here. So like, what are you looking for that like puts a South Asian restaurant like on your radar?
Jacoby, I was waiting for this question because back, I think it was 2015, 2016 when I just started writing for Eater. There were a couple guides to Indian food in Chicago, but even like it wasn't with depth. People talk about the spices because that's really kind of low hanging fruit, like how spicy things are. But no one talks about you can't just go to the corner store and get the spices. It depends on where it is, how fresh it is. Anyone can like roast or grind spices. It's we all have like the machine. We can do that. It doesn't take any you don't have to be Superman to do that. But it's really kind of intentional. Like I'm looking at the menu. I'm looking if it's unique. I'm looking at where the ingredients come from. You can't go to like Restaurant Depot, which is a store on Goose Island. It's a massive mall where a lot of restaurant owners get their food from, and they get it in bulk quantities. But a big store like that won't have kind of the specialty items, the leaves, the flour, the lentils that you need to make exquisite Indian food. And I find like kind of the conversation with other food writers about Indian food to be really kind of basic. How many times am I going to hear naan bread or chai tea, both redundant phrases over again? I'm like, have we gotten past that? Can we talk a little in depth? Just because it's new to you doesn't mean it hasn't been going on for centuries and, like the evolution. And I'm just as like cynical with my mom or talking about what the food used to be. I'm like, let's modern it up. Let's think a little forward. You can love the classics, but you also have to reserve some space for the new stuff too.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. As we transition from the spooky season into the thankful season, my word of the day is gratitude. I want to show gratitude to my family for supporting my passions. I'm grateful for all the folks who listen to me almost every day. And I'm especially grateful to my friends who always check in and let me know it's okay to not always be okay. Seriously, if it wasn't for my friends, I probably would have never taken the time to start therapy when I was younger. If you're thinking of starting therapy, let me be that friend for you and say, maybe give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/citycast today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/citycast. I want to go through this amazing Eat of Chicago map you put together, but I want to go through with a couple of categories. If you're thinking about best spot for your budget, a great place to go where it's not going to break the bank, what is the spot that comes to mind for you?
You know, I think I really like Tandoor Char House in Lakeview. And because first of all, you asked me earlier what are some of the things that I look for in a restaurant, and good ownership. Being the editor of Your Chicago, unfortunately you get to see some of the skeletons. You know where they're buried. And at Tandoor Char House, they have a commitment to the community. Their owner Faraz is doing all sorts of stuff, but he is Indian and Pakistani. And he says, like, my father is Indian, my mother is Pakistani, so therefore I have the freedom to cook anything I want. And he didn't say that, but no, I know what you could read between the lines. He does pasta with butter chicken. You don't find that often. He's creative in a way that just he's going to piss someone off. And once you get over yourself, and they're like, wow, this food is actually pretty good. And now we got to talk about the Devon's vegetarian options. And one of the places that I think is pretty affordable is Annapurna. Annapurna is like kind of an icon on Devon. And I remember there's this one dish with puri, which is kind of a fried flatbread with those yellow potatoes called aloo, or South Indians we would call it palya, and you just kind of tear the fried bread and grab it. It's a fried bread, and it's one of the best comfort foods that you can have. So Annapurna for cheap street eats is always going to be good.
If you're thinking about a good sit down restaurant, places you are going, maybe a date night, maybe a birthday, maybe for just for a night out during the week, what are a couple of places you're going to sit down at?
All right. Well, one of my favorite Indian restaurants in the city is in Logan Square. That's Super Khana International. And it's got two chefs. One chef actually won a Fulbright scholarship to study how to cook in India. And, they take kind of an academic approach to things, but they still have fun with it. They do a butter chicken calzone. They don't have a tandoor oven, which is a clay oven. A lot of folks, they cook the chicken, they cook the breads in. They have a pizza oven instead. So they're doing, they're not doing pizzas. Naan is the kind of the popular kind of thick flatbread. It's really popular in North India. That's what a lot of folks think of when they say in Indian bread. But they're doing pizza dough and with some Indian touches, and like throw in stuff like butter chicken, just throw in like fresh produce from local farms, and just really like cool combinations. You won't see anything. They have the Indo-Chinese noodles that are so light and tasty. They do a mean masala chai there. The cocktails are good. That's one of those places where they could probably charge more, but for the value, I mean, it's a sit-down restaurant. You're not going to get out for under $75, $100, but they'll treat you real well, and it's really good. It's good food.
Mm-hmm. If you're listening and you're trying to keep track of all of these restaurants, we got you. Head down to our show notes. We're going to list them all out for you. So you got a couple budget options in there. We talked about one sit-down restaurant. What's another place that you're sitting down at?
Okay, there are two, but I'll rip the Band-Aid off and talk about Indienne. Indienne is the only Michelin star Indian restaurant in Chicago.
I've been. After I talked to you, you first introduced me to it, and I went.
Yeah, and it's one of three Michelin star restaurants in America. So they have to be doing something right. And Michelin stars are what kind of their honors for fine dining restaurants. The highest you can get is 3 stars. So if you have 1 star, that's pretty remarkable. There are only two 3-starred Michelin restaurants in Chicago, Alinea and Smith. So they're in that ballpark. And it's a tasting menu restaurant, meaning like you have 3 choices. Do you eat meat? Are you vegetarian or are you pescatarian? And you pick one of those lanes, and they will just start bringing out food, and it's really cool because it's not heavy. They will keep on bombarding you with food, but it's light and it's very veggie forward. They make it look really pretty. There's some interactive elements and just like the crispness of everything. And it's familiar, lit modern. So it does tap into that kind of spike of nostalgia with, all the spices that you remember. And what I'm hearing for folks that aren't familiar with the cuisine is it's a really good gateway to like, okay, this woke me up to some taste. Where can I get this next? They have got a great wine, great cocktails, and it's just one of the most unique dining experiences in Chicago. It's really crisp, and it's one of those special occasion restaurants, and they're really kind of pushing the envelope in Chicago.
And I thought of my experiences this year, the staff at Indian did the best job of breaking down the ingredients, breaking down what was on the menu, giving me flavor profiles, asking questions. I don't know. It felt like a safe space to not know what the hell was going on. Because fine dining can already be intimidating regardless of where you are. But fine dining restaurants in a culture that you are not particularly familiar with can be extremely overwhelming or extremely intimidating. And I thought they did just such a great job of kind of walking me through the experience.
You should want to be empowered to ask questions. You are entitled to ask questions, and they should, if they are a trained staff, answer them because they want you to have a good time, and you have a better time when you're comfortable. Also, if you don't know what a specific herb is, ask. If you don't know a dish, how it's prepared, ask. There are no dumb questions. It's not about etiquette here. It's about enjoyment. And especially if you're going to throw that money down, you're walking out like dropping $150, $200 a person. Come on.
Exactly. Before we move on to best for sweets or for desserts, was there another sit down restaurant on your list?
The Coach House, which is in Wicker Park, they're a tasting menu restaurant run by a chef who grew up in Qatar. And he is South Indian, but he's Muslim. So he just brings a really cool perspective, meaning like, this is stuff that you won't find on other menus. He was doing this eater video, just came out a couple months ago, and did a whole feature about one of their duck dishes. It's actually part Persian. It's like based on this ancient recipe, and they kind of based that dish and they turned it into a second restaurant called Mira, which just opened in Bucktown. It's not as fancy as the Coach House because Coach House is tasting menu only. You're not going there for a casual experience. Mira is a Mexican and Indian mix, and they're doing it in really thoughtful ways. It's probably the hottest restaurant in Chicago right now, and they do stuff like a quesadilla made with roti, which is another type of Indian bread. They do a carne asada served with a mashed eggplant called barden berta. It's an Indian dish. And it's very smart. It's just not, we're going to take a taco or tortilla and like throw a lot of like random Indian stuff. It like, you need that kind of balance.
Lamb barbacoa biryani.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Like this scallop taco over there that I still can't stop thinking about. And they also do like cured seafood. Like ceviche, but with Indian spices. And, you don't find this kind of stuff at the normal restaurant. And as much as I love Devon's always going to be like what I would call working class South Asian food. I don't think there's room enough for like a fancy tasting menu spot, nor does it have to be to kind of give it credibility. But to get that stuff, you kind of have to flee your base a little bit. I mean, the same thing happened in Greektown. Same thing happened on Taylor Street with Italian food. You need to kind of spread your wings a little bit, not as a diss to where you came from, just to kind of push the limits a little bit. So Coach House and Indian are like, you're talking for like a little upscale kind of celebratory thing. That's where I would recommend.
Let's talk about earlier. You were talking about an sort of an Indian ice cream dessert, but let's talk about some other good places for sweets. Obviously, people who listen to know I got a sweet tooth, but I also like some good desserts, some good pastries. I ain't gonna never say no to the menu.
On Devon, I was really love King Sweets. King Sweets more of like again more of a Pakistani type desserts, but they have fresh jamun. You know, and sometimes you don't want the jamun that's just sitting, the gulab jamun that's just sitting for like hours, and maybe someone will stir it up a little bit to get the other side, you know, properly saturated. But you know, this is freshly batched. They also do Indian ice cream, which isn't churned. It's you know, it's a little creamier. They are using like flavors like mango and pistachio, and I can't within like good conscience say, Jacoby, you know what? Go to this place because of the desserts. They're really good. Because there's another thing in kind of South Asian in Asian culture overall. It's called like the not too sweet kind of saying. Like, you know, you want things that aren't like won't like pucker your face. That's a real trend. You just want a little bite and you're done. And I think that's like a little bit of culture. There's a little bit of you know, like people have shunned because pastry chefs haven't had a great tremendous success using South Asian ingredients. So I think there's really room for that overall in an American cuisine to incorporate South Asian flavors in a better way.
I was just looking. It looked like what King Sweets is not too far down from Tahora Sweets, from Pak Sweets. And so they've got a few locations right there. Of course, we have to ask, what are some good places for vegetarian options?
I like Art of Dosa. They have a location in downtown in the food hall formerly known as Revival Food Hall. Mm-hmm. And what I like about their food is it is actually not traditional. They use kind of the Beyond Meat proteins and that sort of thing. They do this thing called Chicken 65, which is an Indian Chinese dish. It's think about it as like a crispy fried chicken nugget, almost like a General Tso with a little different spices, but they do a vegan version of that, and then they stuff it in the dosa and that as a wrap, and that's completely vegan. If you want a little bit more of a traditional bent, Udupi Palace on Devon, they do a really good masala dosa with you know, stuffed with those yellow potatoes, and the sambar is kind of the brown gravy that you throw in and you just tear into it and you dip and you eat. It's a pretty fantastic experience.
Facts. You've given us a few more modern, maybe even fusion restaurants, but if you are looking for the classics, the places that you know the old heads is going to, and when you walk in, the conversation is all back in my day, where is a place that you know you can go for just good old classic sort of nostalgic meals?
All right. Well, India House and India Garden. And those spots, they, first of all, if you're throwing a special event, a wedding, they own the private event scene. You know, like from here on that, they got that stuff on lock. So knowing that those holidays, those events, it's about nostalgia, it's about tradition, they're going to be able to give you those, you know, the lamb curries, the Rogan Josh, which is, you know, the braised lamb stewed for a long time. You want to rip your bread, you know, Indian food is best enjoyed with your hands, and sop that up and grab it. And you're supposed to only use your right hand, but I'm lefty, so, you know, that's another thing that I, you know, spit on tradition a little bit. But, you know, you grab it, you soak it, and then, you know, you got your different chutneys, you got your raita, the cucumber cooling, the yogurt's a really big part of the meal. And make sure that, you know, you're sharing, because one of the things that I don't understand is when folks try to order their own dish. This is family style. There's nothing, you know, there's no deviation here, you know, unless you're going to a tasting menu restaurant. You're here to share, and you're supposed, you know, just kind of the magic of the meal. If you're just keeping to yourself, you know, just stay at home.
Diwali is this week and has been celebrated throughout the end of October going into November. It's celebrated by many Hindus and others here and all over Southeast Asia. Are there any places that offer traditional Diwali foods or any deals during this week?
So the kind of the idea of a traditional Diwali food going out, that's brand new. If you usually you celebrate at home, you're cooking at home. That's how the typical celebrations are. And now that's changing, mostly because restaurants, ever since the pandemic, they see a holiday and they know this is a money making opportunity. Not because they're greedy, is because they need to do anything to survive. And, folks are kind of burned out. You're staying at home, you're working at home, you got a lot of stress. You want to go out, you want to start these new traditions. So it's more about creating experiences that are worth, spending money on and like investigating. Basant over in North Center, the chef. His brother owns another restaurant called Kama, which has 2 locations. So I always think it's kind of funny that they're doing dueling restaurants and they didn't kind of combine like Voltron and decide to let's do this together. But they're also they cook pretty differently. And so for Diwali, which is also called Deepavali, it just depends on where we're in the country or where your parents grew up. They're doing some stuff like they're doing a duck mango kebab. Which sounds phenomenal. They're doing fusion. They're doing a vindaloo pork belly tonkatsu, so they're bringing a little bit more Japanese flavor into that. And then one thing that is like a signature over at Basant is they do really great fish and chips. So they're doing fried cod with mint chutney, and then Indian seasoned fries. That's a good standard. And they're doing a really good thing. But when you're like, I'm not a religious person, but there are not a lot of house of worships in the city and for South Asians. So restaurants are kind of de facto becoming these places where you can dress up in your fashions, your sari, your silver kameez, and just be yourself a little bit.
Hey, we will have all of these places listed in our show notes, as well as a link to Ashok's broader guide from the Eater Chicago website. Ashok, as always, I appreciate you making time for CityCast Chicago. Every time you come on, I leave hungrier than I started.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jacoby.
Before we let you go, it's Best of Chicago season with our friends at the Chicago Reader. Every year you can nominate and vote on your favorite DJ, favorite music festival, best infused gummies, best tattoo artist, best art gallery, and so much more, including nominating CityCast Chicago for best podcast and Hey Chicago for best email newsletter in the City Life category. Nominations are only open until November 4th, so please, when you get some time, jump in there and nominate us for best podcast, best email newsletter. In the meantime, in between time, bookmark our website, chicago.citycast.fm, so you can access all that's available to you in the CityCast ecosystem. We've got our latest articles there, our best food and drink list, our neighborhood and walking guides, and so much more. Something you can only get on the podcast, of course, is my good news. I know some of y'all love when I sing it. Some of y'all hate when I sing it. Some good news. We got a chosen few DJs Halloween. Yes, a house music Halloween party at the Point in Wicker Park tomorrow night from 6 to 2 a.m. Legends Alan King, Mike Dunn, Terry Hunter, and Wayne Williams gonna be in the building. We're gonna drop a link for you in our show notes. As always, we appreciate you for listening and reading. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.